Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MJ Innocent podcast. My name is Moonwalker Tanya, and I am your host. All right, so in this episode, I want to talk about something that Michael and I had in common. We both did not like dogs. And if you are a dog person, I will try not to be too brutal, but at the same time, there are times when I feel like I cannot basically speak how I really feel about dogs without being judged. But yeah, I won't be as brutal. I'll put it to you that way. So first, we'll start with Michael. Now, when Michael was celebrating his first Christmas back in 1993 with Elizabeth Taylor, she was staying at Neverland at the time, and she brought her dog. And when Michael opened his bedroom door, she said, "Don't jump at the sight of my little dog." And then Michael said, "She knows I don't like that dog because I'm afraid of dogs. They're little, but they bite." That's true. And the thing is, and that's not the only situation that I've heard of when it comes to dogs. There was a video of Chris Tucker talking about how he and Michael went to a friend's house to hang out and they were having a good time and stuff, but then all of a sudden the owner's dog, I guess, scared Michael or something, and the dog actually ripped Michael's pants. And Michael was freaking out as he was trying to run out of the house. I felt so bad for him. And you see, that's part of the reason why if I ever go to someone's house who owns a dog, well, first, I am hoping that they will at least try to keep their dog away from me because, dogs are a very easy way to make my anxiety go through the roof, But that also explains my point. Actually, there was a dog that someone in my family owned where he actually ruined one of my skirts once. I was not happy. So ever since then, whenever a relative gets a new dog or whatever, I'm thinking in my head, okay, what should I wear? Definitely something that I wouldn't be upset if it was ruined. I mean, it's sad that I had to think that way, but, it's... You can't really blame me, can you? Yeah. Okay. So I completely understand where Michael is coming from, and I think the hardest part is I've talked to a lot of people who do not like dogs, and they basically feel the same way that I feel, that they have either been judged or they are told things like, "Oh, the dog's not going to hurt you." Just in case if you are one of those dog owners who have said that, let me just give you some advice, okay? If you can't read a person's mind, then you can't read your dog's mind either. Dogs can be very unpredictable. And the truth is, there actually was one dog someone in my family used to own where it was almost like, like how if dogs can sense that you're afraid of them, they love to take advantage of it and scare you even more. Well, there actually was one dog that did the exact opposite. So I was actually okay with that dog. She didn't jump on me. She didn't chase me. She didn't slobber on me. It was very clear that somehow she was actually able to tell that I was not a dog person. And, she basically just didn't bother me at all. And the thing is, if dogs were able to do the exact same thing, I wouldn't have much of a problem because then they would know, okay, she doesn't like dogs. I just need to just stay out of her space. It's not that hard. But Yeah, it was one of those rare occasions. Unfortunately, I haven't always been that lucky. Ever since I was little, I was around dogs when I never wanted to be. And the only time when I would feel okay around them is when they were getting so old to the point that I could outrun them, basically. Which I could do anyway, but the older they were, the more advantage I had, I guess, is the way of putting it. And thankfully, they couldn't climb trees. So when I had to run as fast as I could away from them when I was outside, at least I was able to climb up a tree and they couldn't get me. And of course, my relatives would always say, don't run because the dog will chase you. Just walk and the dog won't chase you. Actually, that's not true. There were times when I was walking and the dog chased me anyway. So then I started to run. So, yeah. If you're going to try to tell us stuff that isn't true, that's not going to help. Let's see. There were some other situations. There was one dog in the family that was a complete disaster. I literally described that dog as possessed. And I'm not joking, you guys. I really do believe that she was the devil in a dog's body. She would always act like a psychopath, even though I think she was around for 15 years. And she saw us maybe 2 or 3 times a month for the 15 years that she was unfortunately here. And she never calmed down. Like, she would always act as if she's never seen us before. And I know that some people have tried to tell me, well, it just means that the dog is excited that you're coming over. Well, that's not how she was acting. And the worst part of it is the only way she would shut up is if you sat down in a chair and didn't move a muscle. I swear, she had to be put on a leash just so, like, we could get up to go get a drink or if we had to use the restroom. Yeah, that's how bad it was. And I also realized that there was another reason why that happened. So apparently what happened was, and this is a tip that I think all dog owners need to pay attention to, because when that dog was misbehaving, and then when everyone sat back down, she would run over to the owner, and the owner would pet her and say, like, "Oh, you're such a good baby dog." She was not a good dog at all. And so I don't want anyone to attack the owner because they were a very important person in my life. And they unintentionally was rewarding her bad behavior. And I think that's why she never stopped. But the thing is, you would think, when they would always say that dogs are so smart and things like that, like, if dogs are really that smart, you would think that they would realize, be like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be acting like a psychopath every single time when these people who I've seen many, 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 many times in my life, they come over. And for some reason, I have to be put on a leash in order for them to move. So maybe I need to cut it out. But even my doctor was like, "Tanya, trust me, I have 2 dogs and I assure you, dogs are not that smart." And I'm like, "Thank you. I love you." And some people will say, well, there are some dogs who become seeing eye dogs and dogs who help people with disabilities and stuff. And if they're trained very well, then that's good. But unfortunately, I even saw two seeing eye dogs that were not trained very, very well at all, to the point that when the two dogs saw each other, they actually almost pulled both of their owners, who are blind, into traffic. So it was really bad. So all I can say is, you have to train your dog. That's all I can say. Because that's actually part of the reason why I'm afraid to even walk in my neighborhood, because I'm afraid of being chased. And you see, in my neighborhood, it is by law that you have to keep your dog either tied up or in a fenced area. They cannot just be loose in the neighborhood. Well, most of my neighbors follow it and some don't. And we've had some situations, and, well, thankfully there is a shelter that will pick up a dog if it is loose in the neighborhood and the owner has to pay in order to get the dog back. And to anyone who thinks that that's harsh, no, I don't think it's harsh at all. Because I've seen a lot of terrible videos on YouTube of dogs attacking children. I've heard horror stories of dogs attacking adults literally for no reason. And at the very end of this video, I'm going to tell you a story that my friend Shatara sent me. It was very devastating. So I'm going to tell you a few bad experiences I've had in my neighborhood. But first, there's one more thing I want to say about the female dog who I literally referred to as possessed. Well, thankfully she can't torture me anymore unless she appears in my nightmares, but there was one time where my father came over to my relative's house to put in a dishwasher. The dog was standing on the couch to look through the window into the kitchen to watch my father, because they put the gate up so she couldn't interfere, because she would. And the problem was, I was still in the family room sitting in a chair, a squeaky chair, I need to add. And I thought, I need to think of a way of how I can get from the family room into the kitchen over the gate so she can't catch me. Well, there were times when she actually turned her head at me to make sure that I was still sitting. Yeah. She was like, "You better not move." And so I was thinking, with this squeaky chair and everything, like, when I decide to get up, I really need a bolt, because I'll probably only have like maybe 1 or 2 seconds head start since she was standing on the couch. So I waited a few moments for her to not turn her head at me. And I was like, okay, 3, 2, 1. I stood up, I ran for the gate, and I'm getting one leg over the gate, and all of a sudden, yeah. Now do you understand why I called her possessed? Yeah. I was like, what the hell? Yeah, that was a really bad dog. It was like that every single time I would go over to that house. It literally felt like, well, I don't want to compare it to a certain situation, but let's just say it just felt like, you're basically trying to get to safety, basically, every time. Yeah, she was a demon. Yeah. Okay, so there were a few times in my neighborhood where I had to deal with some of the neighbor dogs, and that's part of the reason, like I said, why I don't walk in my neighborhood. There was a time when my father brought me home from work because I can't drive. There was a dog on my porch. When it saw us pull up, it jumped off the porch, ran up towards the car, and was acting as if I was trespassing when really it was the other way around. And it was basically acting like if I opened that door, it was going to attack me. And I'm not exaggerating. It was not a good dog at all. And so my father had to get out of the car and try to shoo the dog away. And that's finally when the neighbors called the dog. And my father said, "You need to keep your dog tied up. My daughter is terrified of dogs, and it was on her property." Thankfully, there was only one other time when that dog was loose, and it tried to approach me, but I gave it a dirty look, and it turned around and walked away. So thankfully, that time it worked. It usually doesn't work. And when I was growing up, I always heard the phrase, "A dog is a man's best friend." Well, when I was a kid, I used to be a smart mouth and said, "Well, I'm not a man." You know. And I would say probably the worst experience I ever had with a dog in my neighborhood was when I was recovering from knee surgery. I was using a walker. I was minding my own business. I was on my property. I was walking up towards the porch. And then a little dog that lives all the way down the street, not even close to my house, decides to run up to my yard, runs up towards the porch, starts growling at me, and has its top teeth over its bottom lip. And for those of you who do not know, that's usually a face a dog makes before they attack. And like I said, like I was completely defenseless. I couldn't run away because, I just had knee surgery. So thankfully, I screamed for my mom and she shooed the dog away. But yeah, it would have been bad if that dog bit me. I really could not tell you what would have happened. But all I can say is, people have to understand that with someone, let me try that again. As someone with a severe dog phobia, if you want to have a dog as a pet, I couldn't care less. Do whatever you want. But all I ask is for you to keep it away from me. And I really don't think it's that hard of a request, And the thing is, whenever people would say a dog is a man's best friend, well, here's something that I have to say in response to that. That's like saying that everyone loves kids, and we know that's not true. Okay? So, and to anyone who thinks that my dog phobia is ridiculous, which unfortunately I have had that situation happen many times. Let me put it to you this way. Like, say, for example, if you don't like snakes and you go over to a friend's house, they have a pet snake, you don't want it loose, but the owner was like, well, I don't care. So you might want to keep that in mind if you try to give people a hard time, because sometimes I've heard many stories of people who try to tell others that they're scared of dogs, and they purposely let their dogs loose around them to make it worse. So it's just a little something to think about, because everyone has a phobia of some kind. Okay, so as a closing, to really prove my point of how dangerous dogs can be, my friend Shatara sent me a story of a man in Detroit, Michigan, who was dropped off at a bus stop and was walking home minding his own business when all of a sudden 3 dogs ran off the property and attacked the guy. It was so bad that he actually ended up in the hospital on life support. Yes. And then 4 days later, he died. So, Shatara sent me another article about this unfortunate tragedy. All 3 dogs have been put down, which I know some people will have issues with that, but you know what? I'm just going to say it. Those 3 dogs deserved it. I'm sorry. If dogs are just going to attack people for absolutely no reason, then that's exactly what they deserved. And that's another reason why I'm so terrified of them. Like I said, they are unpredictable sometimes. And the owner of the 3 dogs has been fined $5,000. And they also said that they will do anything to try to make this unfortunate tragedy right. So, at least the owner is taking responsibility. So, I hope I didn't upset you guys too much, but this is just something that I've been wanting to say for a very long time, because a lot of people would always say, well, why do you hate dogs? Why are you so scared of them? I'm like, well, you have to try to put my phobia in your own shoes. Think of something that you're afraid of, but just replace it with a dog, and then you'll understand where I'm coming from. Like if you're afraid of snakes, or if you're afraid of mice or squirrels or and other things like that, it's really not that difficult to try to think of it, but sometimes, people are not as open to it. So, yeah, like I said, if you want to have a dog as a pet, I don't care. Just keep it away from me. That's all I ask. It's really not that hard. But thankfully, I'm not going to say who, but there are a few people in my family who got a new dog a couple years ago. I was not thrilled about it, but they promised to keep the dog away from me. And even though it did get loose a couple of times, I was able to outthink the dog and run into a room and shut the door quickly. So I don't know if I'll be lucky every single time, but yeah. So all I can say is, sometimes there can be ways to treat a phobia, but sometimes it can also make it worse. So, and the number one thing I recommend is, because someone actually did say this to me once, do not tell someone who has a phobia to just get over it. That is not what you say. But don't worry, I threw it back in that person's face because they had phobias too. I was like, well, you remember like how you have a phobia of tornadoes and wasps and mice? Just get over it. They didn't say anything after that. I was like, yeah. Yeah. So, just a little topic that I wanted to discuss, and it actually does make me feel better that Michael also had a dog phobia. Not as bad as mine, I would say, but still, it just feels good when you're not alone in situations like that. And I have a lot of friends in the community who are scared of dogs too. So, yeah, let me know what you think about this in the comments, and I will see you soon.